season has been brought to you by Radisson Red, Johannesburg, Rosebank. Style you can bank. Great day, everyone. It's your man, Ed Dudley. You see Charmaine roll her eyes at me? You see the grief I get from my girlfriend across the pond, who I've actually never physically met. But one day, we will connect. Miss Charmaine Soobramoney, how are you doing today?
I'm always fabulous, Deloitte. And I mean, who needs to connect physically when we can actually connect telepathically as well as electronically? And through the power of collaboration, we can just make magic in the world. And that's what we strive to do every single Friday.
Well, I'm a hugger, so when I finally meet you, I'm just gonna give you a big old hug because it's been a long time coming. So, but
I
it's a
know,
it's a pleasure to share this space with you.
it's
Today's going to
always a
be.
pleasure.
I'm really interested in today's show because, as you know, I've been in the financial industry for quite a while, and now we have a seasoned veteran that we get to chat with a little bit. Would you like to share a little more about him?
No, I just want to say we have this amazing, and I'm going to say young man because 70 is young, that has a whole lot of wisdom to share, but more importantly, a humble, beautiful, kind soul that uses whatever he can in spaces that matter to improve the lives of many. So, on that note, Mr. Zillard, would you mind bringing Mr. Jeff Van Rooyen into the Ubuntu house? Hello, Mr. Van Rooyen. It's magical to have you, and thank you
Hi,
for
good
joining us.
afternoon. Good afternoon, Charmaine. Good afternoon, Ed.
Good day,
Thank you
sir.
so much for having me. It's a real privilege and honor for me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
It's a joy to actually
Mm,
have you in the Ubuntu house, Mr. Van Rooyen.
mm.
Your spirits, your impacts, and all that you've done is, it makes me proud to be South African, but more importantly,
Thank you.
what you have done and continue to do, and how you've like like moved mountains, if I can actually call it that. But before we go into this
Mm,
amazing book, I'd like for you to
mm,
just take us on your journey, on your life story, and
mm.
why is it that you are so intentional about how you utilize your time
Mm.
and your resources.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Charmaine. I think a good place to start, I suppose, is to give you some insight into why I've written the book. All right.
Mhm.
So I think in the first instance, I'm always reminded of what Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of the UK, said. And as we all know, Winston Churchill was come from a very privileged background. He was always in a position of power and influence. And he's a man who said that history is always written by the victors, right? And I just felt that it's very important for us who are on the other side of the divide also to tell our story, so that history can be complete, right? I think the one of the reasons then why I wrote this book was just for the historical record, so that people can have a much more, balanced view, of the history, and in particular in my context, it's about what life was like, under the apartheid regime. Okay. The second reason is that I have learned a lot of lessons along the way, and over the years, I've also tried to motivate, encourage, inspire young people on the basis of the lessons that I've learned, right? And so when you do this on a one-on-one basis, then you can only touch a few lives, so to speak. And it just sort of occurred to me that if I could write a book, I might be able to reach a much wider audience. So that was the second motivation, right? And then I also had going through this whole writing process, there was an unexpected benefit that I'd not anticipated when I started writing the book. And sort of, I realized that, you know, um, I I did experience a lot of trauma, a lot of hurt, and a lot of pain, along the way. And I think I have to acknowledge that, I have to acknowledge it. And I think writing the book and telling the story, I realized was also a way of unburdening myself, so to speak. And I found it a very therapeutic process. So that whole, you know, feeling lighter in my spirit, so to speak, at the end of the writing process was just an unexpected benefit. But just in terms of where my journey started, so I was born in Alexander Township, which was a very multicultural community. So you had Indian people, colored people, and when I talk about colored people, I'm talking about people of mixed descent, right? African people as well as Chinese. All it's a real melting pot. So I sort of was born into that environment. My father was African and my mother was colored. And it just so happened that when I was 9 years old, my mom and dad separated. And that was the last time I saw my father, at the age of 9. And because I was raised by, the maternal side of my family, the Van Rooyen side, the colored side of my family, that's why my surname is kind of Van Rooyen. And I always have to tell the story because, I mean, at that young age, you don't really have a sense or an awareness of such a sharp sense and awareness of race because we lived in a very, as I say, it was very multicultural. And then I had this very good friend, his name was Meshach, and it's a name that I will never forget for the reason that I'm going to now describe, right? So Meshach and I were very close. He was like a brother to me. And towards the end of our 5th year, Meshach and I were very excited about going to school the following year when we were turning 6. And so when the time came around, then we discovered that we could not go to the same school by virtue of the fact that because I was raised by my maternal family, I had been classified as a colored, by the state, and Meshach was classified as an African, and there was a school for Indians, there was a school for coloreds, and there was a school for Africans. And then we then discovered that we couldn't go to the same school. Now, I mean, as a 6-year-old, I mean, I really, really struggled to wrap my mind around this thing about so what's going on, And I don't come from a politicized family because my grandmother was raised by my grandmother, and she was an orphan, never had an opportunity to go to, so they couldn't explain this to me. And this labeling of me as a colored really haunted me all of my life because it determined throughout my life the school that you have to go to, the neighborhood where you have to live, the kind of work that you could do, and so on. And even when I got to university, I mean, I just want to make the point about how apartheid and race really impacted our lives, right? But first of all, I must say that the separation of races was done very successfully, by the apartheid government because they really kept us separate. And for that reason, even today, so your interaction with other races was very, very limited. And it's for that reason, even today, I only speak 2 languages. I speak English and Afrikaans because, Afrikaans has always been the dominant language, in the colored community, right? They just kind of keep you separate. And eventually, when it was time for me to go to university, although I was born and raised in Johannesburg, I couldn't go to any of the universities in Johannesburg. There was a university designated colored in the Western Cape, right? And so now I had to go to Western Cape University. Coming from a poor family, I mean, it was just financially difficult and financially, sort of, unaffordable, right? And to cut a long story short, eventually I managed to get to study through the University of South Africa, which is a correspondence, by way of correspondence. And then when I finished my undergraduate degree, right, I was really, really looking forward to to going to graduation. I mean, it's anyone's dream, you work hard and, and I studied accounting. Accounting, economics, and finance. It's a very difficult degree to study part-time, and so I really look forward to graduation. And at that point already, when I graduated, UNISA had this beautiful campus sitting on a hill there, in Pretoria, and I kind of visualized that is where I was going to go. I was going to graduate there, that's what I visualized until the graduation brochure arrived. And when that brochure arrived, I saw that they had arranged for me to graduate with the colored people in the Western Cape because they had a separate graduation for colored people, a separate graduation for Indian people, and a separate graduation for white people, right? And I was dismayed, disappointed, you know, and I decided that, just on the basis of principle, I could not subject myself to something like that. So I didn't go to the graduation ceremony. 2 years later, when I graduated with my honors degree, they had integrated the ceremonies for whites, Indian, and coloreds. And because I wanted to have that experience of being capped, then I swallowed my pride and I went to graduation. I'm kind of mentioning these things just to give you and the viewers a sense, of how the apartheid legislation shackled us as Black South Africans, right? Every move you make, there was some law or other constraining you. The last point I want to make, and also give you an opportunity to perhaps, direct the conversation, is that, apartheid not only shackled us in that way, but it was also sending us a message that we were somehow less than human, right? Sort of, second-class citizens, that we were not as bright and not as smart and as gifted as kind of white people, right? So now I speak of the emotional and the psychological shackles. And I also had to push against those things, right? And I have to give credit to my grandmother, Oma Elsie, because I mean, she's the one who instilled in me, the values that I hold today, the principles that I hold today, the self-belief, that I have today. And of all of her grandchildren, I got the most attention from my grandmother because I come from a multicultural family as well. Charmaine, I have got cousins in my family who look like you, for example, right? But my grandmother was more concerned about me, given her own experience in a very race-conscious society, So she's more concerned about me because I had the darkest skin, right? And she felt that, of all of the grandchildren, I was going to have the most difficult life trajectory. And that's why she gave me all of that attention. On a light note, I always say to people that growing up when I was in primary school, I always got washed twice. I would wash myself. My grandmother would have a look at me and she wouldn't be happy with my complexion. And she would give me another wash and it didn't make much of a difference, And she always was not happy about the fact that we were talking about playing soccer every day. So I was out playing soccer. I was out in the sun. And my grandmother always felt that I was making, the problem worse, by spending so much time. So anyway, so that's it. But I really, really do give her the credit to say that, listen, and I think that nurturing of my grandmother helped me, I think, with my own sense of self-worth, my self-esteem, and my self-belief, and kind of positioned me as I was growing up and moving along in my career to always push boundaries.
Well, thank you. That was great. I have a warm fondness for my grandmother too, for you sharing that. It was interesting that you said something about the schools, because here stateside, we dealt with our color as, our, slavery and all the other stuff, and separate schools for blacks and separate schools for whites. But I had no idea that you guys had separate schools for colors, black,
Yeah,
Indian. I had no idea. And I don't think a lot of
yeah.
people here stateside realize that there was so much
Mm,
going on, because everything that was reported over here, it was black, white. That is it.
mm,
There was
mm.
nothing else reported about the color. or the Indian
Mm,
community as well. So thank you for shedding some
mm,
light on that as well.
mm. No,
I
thank
think
you very much. And I think a lot of people are aware of the fact that we lived also in townships that were also designated white and colored and Indian and African. And then so what happened around the time when I was 9 years old, and I think that's one of the reasons when that was the last time I saw my father, because my father, having been classified African, the government at that time decided that they needed to do something about all the townships that were melting pots because that was not consistent with their ideology. So they started separating us and moving us out, to different places. So my family, my maternal family, we were then moved to what they considered to be a color designated area. My father had to move to Soweto, which is quite a famous black area with his family because Soweto was designated African, you see. And that's why, and then that separation happened. And so then I had to live in a colored area, go to colored schools, and so on. And my father and his family, his children, obviously then had to go to African schools in the township. And the one point that I also make at times is to say that in some ways it was very tough to be abandoned by one's father because that was very tough on my mother. It was very tough on my grandmother, right? And we had to endure lots of hardship. But in another way, for me personally, in another way, it was fortuitous because the way the government allocated budgets, they would allocate a lot of money, to white schools, a little less to Indian and colored schools, and very little, to African schools. You see, and then therefore we had the benefit of a better schooling, a better education, because they were able to attract better teachers and all of those things. And I think, and of course, I think I was 12 years old when I suddenly became aware of the fact that we were poor. I mean, up to that age, I didn't even know we were poor. Up to that age, and then suddenly I realized that we were poor when I got to age 12. And up to that point, I'd received a lot of positive reinforcement from my teachers, around my academic performance and my work ethic and all of those things, and they always encouraged me. And I realized that the best way for me to break the cycle or the cycle of poverty was through education. And from that point onwards, age 12, I pursued education as if the devil was chasing me. And because that was it. It was just trying to break the cycle of poverty. And I often reflect and say that, what my life might have turned out very differently if my mom and dad had stayed together, because I would have ended up in Soweto, in the African areas with the under-resourced schools, and I might not have had the benefit of the education that I was able to get as a person classified as colored.
it's such a
I don't know how one
phenomenal.
explains that, but it was a sort of a disguised blessing in a way.
Yeah.
I know it's your share has been phenomenal on so many levels, Mr. Van Rooyen. I mean, you indicated that in writing the book, you wanted to ensure that the history was not forgotten. And for me,
Mm.
when I read your book, there were so many things that I didn't know. So you have actually achieved that. I didn't realize that non-white people fought in World War II, and your granddad did, and the
Yeah,
reward was
yes.
just a bicycle. How did you feel about his sacrifice
Well,
and the
yeah,
reward
look,
in?
yes. I mean, I think my grandfather came from the Northern Cape.
Mhm.
And then he came to Johannesburg because Johannesburg was regarded as the city of gold, and a lot of people coming from different parts of the country to Johannesburg. My grandfather was one of those, and he brought his family. And then and they struggled. I mean, they really struggled to find work, to find jobs. And so this is what my family told me, as I was like growing up,
Sure.
into adulthood. struggled to find jobs. And that's the reason why my grandfather decided to go into the army. It wasn't, I mean, I don't know if my grandfather even understood what was going on in terms of the World War, what people were fighting for. For
Sure.
him, I think it was just an opportunity it was a job, it was an opportunity for him to earn some money and kind of feed the family, right? And then, yeah, as I said, I mean, they played, I think, very many Black South Africans, were drafted, into the army, and they played a role. And then when they got back, the only compensation that they got was yeah, as I said, my grandfather in the book, I said my grandfather was given a bicycle. I mean, for risking his life, he was given a bicycle. And of course, the thing as well is that you now go and fight. What are you fighting for, right? So you could almost say like it was a fight for freedom, right? And you come back to your country and you still have to live under the same apartheid laws, where you. And I must just say something about freedom, right? I have to say something about freedom because, you know, for most of my life, I was sort of wondering, right, what it was like, to really have a sense of freedom, because I didn't have that sense of freedom because, as I explained, we were restricted in so many ways, and I thought at some point that I might never ever, experience, what it means to be free,
Free.
and then of course, when I was 44 years old in 1994, at age 44, we had our first democratic, elections. And I can truly say, I mean, for me, it's hard to describe, just the feeling, and the emotion, because I could honestly say that it was the first time, up to that age 44, where I could say, now I know, now I know what it means to be free. And to this day, I value that freedom because I also know that we paid a heavy price, for that freedom. We really paid a heavy price. And I suppose in some sense, my generation would value that freedom a lot more, let's say, than the current generation. It just means so much more for us. And I get very angry, if you like, when I hear people talk about it was better during the apartheid era. How could it be better during the apartheid era, when we were shackled, not only, as I said, physically by the laws, but also emotionally and
Sure.
psychologically. And so to this day, I think for me, notwithstanding the fact now that today, right, we have all kinds of problems, economic and social, right? I will never anchor back to the apartheid era or the colonial era, you know? And once you've gone through the kind of hardship that my generation's gone through and the earlier generations have gone through, we are not, how could I put it, phased by the challenges that we are having today. I think, earlier on, I spoke about the fact that I write in the book, I use an African idiom where it says that if you want to move mountains tomorrow, you must start lifting stones today. And that's what we are doing, my generation, notwithstanding the external environment, notwithstanding all of the economic and social challenges that we have. We remain focused on what we need to accomplish as we were under the apartheid regime. You set your goals, you remain focused. Today, we're maintaining that focus. And what we're also trying to do, and as I said earlier on, that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is to say within our circle of influence, what difference can we make, right? So we're building the muscle by lifting the stone so that we can move the mountain, tomorrow, so to speak.
Uh, Thank you for sharing that. But I want to take Ed, Miss Van Rooyen, I want to take you back, right?
Mhm.
My perception about your freedom, and I shouldn't be assuming, is that
Mhm.
you were freed your mind when you were a kid already. And it
Yeah.
was not your freedom. I mean, it was a different kind of freedom in 1994. Because
Yes.
in order to have achieved the multiple things, irrespective of the
Mhm.
limitations in terms of legislation, in terms of how we were treated as human beings,
Mm,
you had
mm,
to unblock that. And clearly,
mm.
Omar Alsi encouraged you to be able
Mm,
to believe in yourself. And the
mm,
point I'm driving is one's self-worth, one's self-love, one's self ability to see themselves as human beings and not be defined
mm,
by what other people tell you
mm.
is the tool. And that's what you represent for me, is the tool for accomplishment. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
And can I
And I think,
can I pick up? Okay, carry on.
please do. No, carry on, please do. I just wanted to emphasize that very
Yes.
important
Yes.
point that you live your life by.
Yeah, and I think for me, you're talking about boundaries and defining boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So I've been doing that for most of my life, but I didn't realize what I was doing. Really, it's only with the benefit of hindsight, when you look back and you say, you know what? I can give you so many examples. I mean, let me give you a practical example, and then I will make my point.
Sure.
Practical example is when I decided that I wanted to be a chartered accountant, for example. There were no black chartered accountants around at the time, none. When I got into my training in 1975, there were no black chartered accountants in the country, right? So a lot of people, when I decided to do that, a lot of people said, Jeff, you must be crazy. I mean, what makes you think? They would say, look around you. Do you see any black chartered accountants? And I'd say no. And they say, why not? And I said, well, I don't know. And then some of them might say, well, what makes you think you're going to be the first? You know? And then, but anyway, nonetheless, I decided to pursue chartered accountancy. And when I qualified, I was only the fourth chartered accountant in the country. There was one African and two other coloreds and myself when I qualified. You know, 5 years after I qualified, I was invited to a seminar that was hosted by the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. And the purpose of the seminar was to talk about how can we bring more people of color into this profession that was a lily white profession, right? And I was sitting in this massive auditorium, right, full of white males, because this profession, that is what characterized the profession, full of white males. I was sitting right in the back, and no one, you couldn't see me. Sitting right in the back. And then those years, you always had, and I don't know whether you have it in America as well, but you always had white experts on black people, right? So
Still have it today. We
yeah,
still have
see,
it today.
so now, they never bothered to ask us, why do you think? They would bring a white person to talk about us and our aspirations and our abilities and all of those things. Now I'm sitting in this hall. I know what the purpose is to talk about, can we bring more black people into the profession, into the accounting profession? And this one expert professor from one of the local universities that refused to admit me when I wanted to study there, then gets up there and he says, and I'm going to give you the year just to put it in perspective for you. It was in 1986. It was 5 years after I qualified. And then 1986 is not that long ago. So
Mm.
this professor gets up there and he says, it's just a pipe dream to think that you can bring more black people into the profession because number one, they don't have a business culture, right? Number two, they don't have the aptitude. Number three, they don't have the intelligence. Can you believe it? In 1986, someone talking that kind of, racist drivel. So I get up at the back there of the room, and he was quite startled when he suddenly saw this black person stand up at the back of the room. And that happened to many, many times, given my name, the language, Afrikaans, my schooling, all of that. When people, when it's a Van Rooyen, it's not, and I come along, it's not what they normally expect.
Yeah.
And they often lose their
You're the
composure.
surprise.
It's a surprise, and they often lose their exposure. But most of them take a minute, they compose themselves, and then it's all good.
It's
This
for me. It's
professor,
just no. Go ahead, sir.
this professor took all of 3 minutes to regain his composure because I was now just by merely standing up and saying, "Prof, let me tell you something. As you can see, I'm black. And I'm a chartered accountant. So how do you explain that?" Then he took all of 3 minutes to regain his exposure. He was so startled. And when he regained an exposure, all he could say was, "You are an exception," you know? And so this thing about you are an exception, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it in my life. I've heard it many times because I've always been pushing boundaries, right? And why I pushed those boundaries, I only realized later upon reflection. And that is that I never allowed anyone else to define my boundaries for me. So I always say, but I always say to people now, young people, especially when I talk to them, I say, you know yourself better than anyone else.
Mm.
So why would you allow anyone else to define your boundaries for you? So when someone said to me, "No, Jeff, you can't be a chartered accountant because there are no other chartered accountants," right? I said, "Why not?" And I can give you many, many other examples if we have time about where I was told, even by well-meaning people, to say, "Jeff, you are pushing, you are setting your aspirations. You are not being realistic in terms of the goals that you are setting for yourself, right?" Because now if you and so I said I never allowed people to set boundaries for me, and some set those boundaries out of sheer malice, for sure,
Mm.
right? They would set those boundaries, but others, it's not deliberate. It's
Yeah.
just a case of saying, some people think because when they look at you, the lens that they use has to be their own strengths and weaknesses. That's the lens that all of us use. And so when I say, look, I want to be a chartered accountant, they think, they might think, oh, I'm actually smarter than Jeff. And yet I don't think I can make it. And then they give you negative advice. And they say, Jeff, you're overreaching. And so that for me is a very, very strong principle that when I'm talking to young people in particular, I say, you have to recognize that talent is spread fairly evenly throughout humanity. That's the first thing that you have to recognize. It doesn't matter, whether you're born in Alexander Township or whether you're born in Washington or wherever, right? Talent is widely distributed, and you have to know what your talent is. You're going to discover it, as I discovered at age 12, that I was good academically. Right? And it's a hard thing to do. I only discovered it at age 12. Some people might discover it at age 12. You got to know what your talent is. And then you got to put in the work. And then as you see, so that's just kind of wrapping up what, the point about defining boundaries and
So
how, just that self-awareness shaped my own life.
And
I'm
it
sitting
feels
here.
to
No, I was gonna say
sorry,
I'm
Ed,
sitting
carry
here.
on.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and it's amazing for me the parallels between the states and South Africa. It's just the United States was just a little bit before you guys. I look at our financial industry here in the states. We still have a problem with African Americans and people of color being in the industry. Um, you talk about your name not sounding African or excuse me, black or colored. you know People hear my full name, Edward Dudley, and they can't tell whether what race I am. And then it's been said that Ed, you talk white. So you hear my you hear my dialect, and then you hear my name, and then you automatically assume that I
Yeah,
might be a white gentleman. And I'll never forget working for some companies in the financial industry where I was the only black in the room.
yeah.
There's one role that I had many years ago. I was the first African American to walk into that space, and to this day, they still don't have one. And this was 97, and that's because I still talk to a few of them from that day. So it's very interesting that the parallels between South Africa and the United States.
Mm,
And just to
yeah.
build on that point, though, irrespective of where we are in the world, humanity, I mean, my point is we're all humans first. But
Hmm.
the
Yes.
system has actually divided us to an extent
Mm,
that we haven't been able to shift past that. And it is
mm,
conversations like this, the
mm,
rawness of the conversations, the experiences,
mm,
and by through storytelling, we will do two things: inspire
mm,
people to be able to see they are capable of more, but more
mm,
importantly, the people that are blinded to just look to
mm,
themselves and reflect and go, what am I doing that's not
mm.
helping change the narrative that all of
Correct.
us are humans first, and we're
Mm,
all entitled to
mm,
equal opportunity, actually. To your
mm,
point, and Mr. Van Rooyen will know Jabu Moleketi, he was Deputy
mm,
Minister of Finance ages ago. I invited him to come and speak at one of the collective investment schemes, the unit trust industry, to be the
Mm,
keynote address. And I loved what he did that day. It was him
mm,
and Professor Mervyn King. And Jobu, first thing he said, well, I hope when I come back in a few years' time, this room will be a different demographic. Where are the Black people?
mm.
And
Yeah,
that
no,
was years
absolutely.
ago. So the
Yeah.
reality is, like,
Mm,
statements are being made, boundaries are being pushed. I mean, you're an
mm,
incredible representation. I mean, I like your share today, Ms. Van Rooyen. It was quite, out there. But the way you
mm,
capture this book, though, you share your
mm,
story in a way where you inspire, but also draw people to go, what can we
mm.
each do to change the narrative? And the way you
Yeah,
land your learnings. I love that about you. Um, so the point I'm making is like we each of us are, we need to do what we possibly can to make this
yeah.
world better for all of us.
Mm, mm.
Mr. Van Rooyen, I want to take you back. I mean, you have so many amazing stories and people
No,
need to read your
true.
book.
Yeah, thank
You,
you.
s- you speak about poverty and your awareness around it and the fact that you were a great student. But you talk
Mm.
about an impact of one teacher that you owe a lot
Yes,
for who actually helped you
yes,
become who you are
yes.
today. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to speak about that. And just by the way, he's late now, that teacher. His name was Brian Theron. He's late, but I'm still in touch with his daughter, right?
Okay.
And the way I became friends with her is because she tells me that her father always used to talk about me. Okay. So what happened was that I was employed as a clerk in an insurance company because my ambition to study at university, that ambition was frustrated for a whole number of reasons, right?
Sure.
And one of the reasons is that I went to the colored university for one term. The color, yeah. So I lost my younger brother, and then I had to leave the university and come back for the funeral. I was only 19 years old, so it created an existential crisis for me at age 19 because I loved my brother. I was an older brother. I was a father figure in his life, and he was only 9 years old. And so I then questioned, this whole meaning of life, what it's all about, when your life can just be snuffed out like that, and all of that. So I went through, and it took me a long, long time to recover from that. So I wasn't interested in going back to the university and studying and all of that. I eventually landed a job as a clerk in a company, filing clerk, the best job that I could get. And then they asked me to go to my school to go and get a sort of a copy of my matric certificate, which I didn't have. I get to the school, by sheer coincidence, it happens to be break when I get to the school. I don't know how to explain that. It was truly, truly serendipitous, right? This teacher, Brian Theron, happens to see me. It was during the break. He calls me and he says to me, he was so pleased to see me and all of that. And he says to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, sir, I'm working, as a clerk." He says to me, "But Jeff, you've got too much talent to waste it like this. Why are you not at university?" Then I explained to him, look, I was at the Western Cape University for a semester. My brother died, this, that, and the other. I lost interest. Then he says, "Come with me." He takes me into his classroom, takes out application forms for study at the University of South Africa, sits with me in his classroom, makes me complete the forms, and then says to me, "Now I want you to take these forms and I want you to go register because you are just too talented to be wasting your talent." And so I always tell people that sometimes people can open a door like that for you, but the responsibility is for you to then walk through. I mean, he took me as far as saying, "Let's complete the forms." And then he said, "Now you have to go and submit and register," which I did, right? And that changed my whole life trajectory. And then, of course, over the years, kept in touch with him. Whenever I had some event that I was celebrating, I would invite him and all of that. And I kept in touch with him, all his life, because the week when when he sadly passed on, I was at the hospital and I was also able to have a conversation with him. But he really, just that one intervention changed the trajectory of my life. And that's why even today, I kind of feel that, and I write in the book that subsequent to that, I lost my other sibling as well under very tragic circumstances. So, I kind of feel that I can't do anything for my siblings, right? For reasons beyond my control, but I might be able to do something for other people, for other people. And I think in a way, maybe that's where my compassion also comes from. Although my grandmother was a very compassionate person as well. So now I'm saying, okay, fine, I accept that for reasons beyond my control, I can't be there for my siblings, but I can be there for other people. But it's very, very powerful when one thinks how, just one teacher who had that awareness and the compassion, that intervention kind of changed my life. And I must say to you that over the years, as I work with other young people, give them some guidance and advice, I can't tell you how many times I meet them much later in life. And then they remind me of a particular intervention that also changed the trajectory of their lives. It's just it's so humbling, when you think of it like that.
I mean, so much respect to you, though. I mean, firstly, for Teacher Theron to step into it and do more than he's supposed to have done to help you with the
Correct.
application form. You took that experience and that gratitude and that learnings and you pay it forward to so many other
Yes.
people and forget about it. And the message to whoever's listening, every single one of us has the ability to influence somebody's life, no matter where we are in our lives and where we're going.
Mm,
And your book
mm,
speaks to that like tenfold for me.
mm.
I mean, it even what the greatest takeaway for me is that other people may not believe in you, but don't let that be you.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
Yeah,
know, that was the greatest
exactly.
learning for me and you know, Mr. Van Rooyen, I mean, your life is incredible on so many levels because you push boundaries. You've done a multitude of diverse things. You were in places that other people didn't expect you to be, but
Mm,
through whatever reason and through your own willpower and desire to succeed, you've achieved
mm.
all of that. I want to talk about. I want you to talk about two things. Um,
Okay.
okay, I know you guys were
Yeah,
talking about golf before, so we but not
yeah.
what handicap you guys are, but why you're doing some phenomenal work for people that are in the golfing circles, caddies
Yes.
especially. Talk a bit about that
Mm.
and your impact and your influence there.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for also for this question. So I mean, Ed, you were saying that you started golf when you were in your 30s.
Hmm.
I picked up a golf club for the first time when I was 63 years old, 10 years ago.
Wow.
And again, it was one of those things where people said to me, Jeff, at age 63, you must forget it. You don't know how difficult this thing is.
Jeff
How
doesn't
difficult
listen
this
to
is.
anybody, does he?
Yeah, but I don't listen. I said, I mean, bugger you, I'm gonna pick up this golf club and I'll see. And it is such a wonderful privilege for me that even today at at age 73, I don't play off the senior tees. I play with much younger guys from the same tees. I can hit the ball as far as they hit the ball. In fact, I always say to them, guys, I'm 70 now. You should allow me to play from the front tees, but they won't allow me to play.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So it is just such a wonderful privilege. And now here's the very, very fascinating thing for me. So when I started playing golf some 10 years ago, and naturally I would talk to my golf caddies. And I played on probably more than 20 golf courses in the country over the last, probably 25, more than 25 golf courses in the country over the last decade. So wherever I play, I talk to the golf caddies, and they were telling me about how tough their lives are. And when I kind of examined it, I discovered that they are working today under the dispensation that was put in place by the British during the British colonial rule. Can you believe it? Right? Now, the Brits obviously, during the British colonial rule, when they brought caddies onto golf courses, they didn't regard them as fully human. Thing. Okay, I'm back. So the Brits didn't regard colonial rule, didn't regard golf caddies, black people in general, as full human beings and so on. So they basically brought these guys onto the golf course, said you're going to be self-employed. You'll only get paid when you have a golf bag to carry, right? And they were paid a pittance. So that is the system of self-employment that was introduced during British colonial rule. And then during the apartheid era, the system was maintained for the same reason, because the apartheid government didn't care about them. I mean, it's the same mindset. But what boggled my mind was that almost 30 years after the new democratic, government, absolutely nothing has changed for the golf caddies. They work under exactly the same conditions. You only get paid when you get a golf bag, right? And often they don't get golf bags, so their lives are incredibly hard. And so I then decided to become an advocate for change. And I've learned over the years that, if you want to really make an impact as a change advocate, you have to get yourself organized. So I then established a not-for-profit company called Finding the Fairway Foundation. I drew in some like-minded individuals, and I'm going to say we're now going to use this company that we've established to drive change for the golf caddies. I commissioned a documentary that I paid for personally, on the plight of golf caddies. The documentary is actually called Finding the Fairway, where I kind of, sketched the problem and all of that. That's the name of the documentary. And as I'm speaking to you, I'm still on the journey, because I'm meeting with a lot of resistance from the industry, right? Because they clearly want to maintain the current situation, dispensation, because it's cheap for them. And what essentially happening is that these poor golf caddies are subsidizing players like me, because I ought to be paying a bit more so that they could have a better life, So I'm a change advocate. I'm still dealing even today with levels of resistance that's hard to describe. Uh, I'm very well known across golf courses in the country for this reason, and everyone hates my guts, but I don't care. I don't care, and
I don't hate you. I love you.
I don't care, and I genuinely believe, that at the end of the day, justice will prevail. I'm reminded, I put this quote out there, in my book as well, that Martin Luther King inspired me as well, right? And he says that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it always bends towards justice, you see? So for me, my takeaway from that is that we certainly live in a moral universe. I mean, that's my takeaway from that. And that's why all of us have a moral compass, right? Where does it come from? You have to live somewhere in a kind of a moral universe. And so, and I generally believe when he says that although the arc is long, it always bends toward justice. And so everything I tackle, I just have this belief that I just need to persevere and that justice will prevail in the end, right? But also when I look at what I'm doing, right, I don't have an expectation that the change will come in my lifetime in the same way that Martin Luther King didn't have an expectation. All he was able to say is that I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land, that's all he could say. And for me, I kind of feel that I might not see the final result of my advocacy around a better life for caddies, but even when I'm not there, someone else will pick up the cudgels, and then in the end, justice will prevail. So I take a very long view of
So
what.
yeah, I'm curious about that because first of all, I never thought about it, and I never even heard about it. When the pro golf circuits, like the PGA, comes to South Africa,
Yeah,
were the caddies still being paid the exact same way?
yeah. On the pro circuit, they get a percentage of
Right.
the
Of
price,
the
right? They
price.
get a
Yeah.
percentage. And there on the pro circuit, because of that, they get the reward system is different. And because of that, you would have black and white caddies, right?
Mm.
But at the club level, so I'm not talking about caddies at club level, because
Yeah. So at the club.
of this dispensation, is 100% black caddies. White people won't come and work under these conditions. This is just slave labor, and it's cheap labor, you know.
It's
And
actually
it benefits the clubs, it benefits the player, because as a financial person, Ed, you would know that there's a layer of cost that's not factored in. So I'm paying less of a subscription than I ought to pay because that layer of cost
It's not there.
is not there, you know. So I'm paying less. And so what does it mean? It effectively means that I'm a fairly, I don't want to say I'm a wealthy guy, but I'm not poor, right? Why should a golf caddy subsidize me? It should be the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So, but they are effectively subsidizing us. And so anyway, yeah. So I'm on that path. I'm on that journey, and I think again it was probably serendipitous, you know, that I got into this golf thing,
you did.
you know, a decade ago, and I'm kind of driving this change. And I must just give you this one example that 2 years ago, the club where I'm a member, which is the Johannesburg Country Club that I'm speaking about, I was a member there for 3 years. But for most of that time, I just used it for lifestyle purposes. You know, I was entertaining clients and all of that until I started playing golf. And about 2 years ago, they asked me to stand for an election to get onto the governing body of the club, which I did. Stood for an election, got great support from the members. I was elected. And when I started this advocacy, they kicked me out. I kid you not. No, they kicked me out. I mean, in 2020, mid 2022, they said, no, you must go because, you know, you're just creating havoc. And then I said, because I was just pushing this agenda of a better life for caddies too hard, you know, and too much for their liking. And then, of
It's
course, you know, I mean, I didn't make a big fuss about it. I just said, okay, fine, you want me to leave, I'll leave. And I left.
So when your name pops up at certain clubs, are you banned at certain clubs?
Well, let me first of all tell you what happened in my club. You know, at the point when they kicked me out, they said to then the one guy says to me, because you know, I mean, like I'm generally a nice guy. I'm a calm guy, but I can also get very angry.
we all can.
And
There's
then
light and
and
dark
then and
regions.
this guy says to me, a lot of people don't see the anger, you know. I have a way of masking it and so on. But anyway, and this guy says to me, if you continue with this advocacy, we are going to pull you before a disciplinary committee and we may expel you from the club. And I basically said, you know what, to myself, I wish you could do that because it will give me an opportunity to put this whole thing out in the public space, you see, where we can really have a serious conversation. And I've written a whole chapter in the book on this, and I name the club, and I tell in the book exactly how I left the governing body in the hope that they will do something about it. But someone very smart must have said to them, don't do it. It's exactly what Van Rooyen wants you to do. So I've heard nothing from them.
I love your courage.
Yeah,
I love the way you navigate the spaces. You know, you're not
yeah.
there to be loved, but you do your best to be
No.
able to make life easier for most people. Ms. Van Roy, that documentary, where is it? How can people access it?
If you go to www.findingthefairway one word
Mm-hmm,
.org,
mm-hmm.
right? There is a way that you can then access the documentary,
Sure.
you know,
Fabulous.
or like in your particular case, you and Ed, I will send you the link. Okay, so but just
Okay.
generally for people if they want to, that's where the website is. But in your particular instance, I'll send you the link, and you can. It's only a 21-minute documentary, but it gets really straight to the heart of what the issue is. You know.
And that's what we need. We need to use different mediums to be able to get to the heart of an issue to create more awareness. It's actually
Exactly.
sad, though, that people of that caliber that's running the club did not have a conversation around it as to how to improve. and the only tactic was expel the guy that's actually advocating for change. So
Yeah.
there's lack of compassion, lack of desire for change, and just once again the desire to self-serve is so evident in
I'm
Well, I
the
must
way
just
this
say,
played
Ed,
out.
the one of the challenges that we have today in this country is that there are still pockets in our society where white males still rule the roost.
and that's what I was about
And
to ask you about the
golf
club. What's
clubs, I was the only black male on that golf committee, on that governing body. I was the only black male, and most of the clubs, 99% of the clubs in the country, the majority of the members of governing bodies are white males, right? So when I make this point, I'm not making this point because I want to create division, right?
Yeah,
I'm making the point that they still remain trapped in the past. They are still shackled by our history of colonialism and apartheid. And the point that I'm making to them, right, is that we can do better, and we need to find a way. We cannot remain trapped in the past. And as much as I'm not remain trapped in the past, I'm
you
just
could be
using my past experience
to
to
share.
help build a different society. And so that's the message that I'm putting across to them. I'm not trying to poke a finger in your eye, but I'm reaching out so that you and I can work together to create something better and do better for the golf caddies. But they're not buying that message as yet. For them, they just clinging to the past. They clinging to white privilege. They clinging to the power. They clinging to the authority. But the difference between South Africa and the United States, Ed, is that in this country we are by far the majority. We are a population of some 65 million, less than 5 million white folk. So it's just a matter of time, just simple mathematics, simple arithmetic. They cannot sustain their current privilege. It's just as simple as that. It's
so I
just a
sit
matter of
here
time. Yeah.
So I sit
It,
here and laugh because we have a demo. They see the handwriting on the wall. There's a demographic shift here in the United States where
Yeah.
so-called minorities here are going to, in just a matter of time, be the majority. And we have certain pockets in different states and localities that are trying to put laws and do things in unscrupulous ways to try to squash it. But the handwriting is on the wall. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
time. They know it.
Yeah. It's a matter of time. And you know what saddens me, Ed, is that look, any person with common sense must know that what prevails within the golf industry, right, cannot last forever. But what saddens me is that sometimes I think that they know this, but they've just taken a very conscious decision that they will hang on to their power and their privilege for as long as possible.
For as long as
They
they can.
know that it's inevitable that change will come, but they say until such time, let's just do our
find the
damnness.
way.
Yeah,
Mm.
and that's very sad.
It is. Uh, well, thank you for being as courageous and championing these. It's actually a human rights violation, let's be honest.
Yeah,
It really is. And I mean, the Constitution talks for equality for all of us. But Mr. Van Rooyen, I want to take you to another space, right?
sure.
Um, from the point of view, I mean, what I admire about your ability to critically think and self-reflect, and I mean, in your book, you make reference to the opportunity to become part of the board of MTN in 2004.
Correct.
Most people would have jumped at the opportunity, but you went back and crossed the dots and looked at it and go, well, that's going to be a conflict. And the reason I'm
Yes.
making that point is, but most leaders in our country are
Mm,
sometimes blinded to the whole concept of conflict and just
mm,
move on, pretending that it's all kosher and, you know, they're going
mm.
on the purpose of service. So you declined the position. And then when you left the Financial Services Board, you were reapproached
Yes.
to serve on that board.
Mm,
And I mean, and you probably know where I'm going with this comment, where we are
mm,
as a country. And I know it's about being positive and inspired. And to your idiom, we need to, to
Mm,
move a mountain, a rock at a time.
mm,
So our current president was
mm,
chairman of MTN at that point in time.
mm.
Charmaine, for
Um,
those people, Charmaine, for the people that don't know, what is MTN?
MTN
Uh,
is,
eh, yeah, sorry, carry on.
you go, Mr. Van Rooyen.
No, MTN is just one of the largest, the second largest telecommunications company in South Africa.
That's
Others
listed.
would be Vodafone and telecommunications, mobile
Mhm.
telecommunications companies. But they've also morphed over the years. They're now a multimedia company, and there's been some kind
I
of
know.
morphing that has taken place. But it's also one of the largest companies that are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I mean, you can do the mathematics, but you can do the conversion. But in our currency, in rand terms, their market capitalization is over 200 billion rand. So it's a very significant, business. So and it's also a business that was only started in 1994. So it's just a
After.
business that has just grown phenomenally, over the last 30 years. So coming back to, so are you happy for you to proceed with your question then, Charmaine?
So I'm curious, okay, you've accepted the position, having engaged with our current president in the boardroom. What
Yes.
was he like? What is his strengths? And what do you think is his failings as a president at
Yeah.
the moment?
So so I knew the president even before I was appointed to the board because he was a trade unionist.
Mm,
And I've also been involved with trade unions, over the years. I write in the book, for example, that I was the auditor and financial advisor to the second largest trade union in the country, the National Council of Trade Unions, it was called at the time.
mm,
So I know about the trade union. So, we've crossed paths a couple of times, even before I got the approach to join him on the board of MTN,
mhm,
and and I think when I declined the position the first time they approached me, I did it on the basis, as you say, of conflict of interest. And I think they respected that.
mhm,
They respected that. So I was hardly out of the job 6 months. And then they approached me again, and then I was then able to take up the position. I've always had a lot of respect for President, who's now President Ramaphosa. He was my chairman of that board for about 8 years. And and I was also given lots and lots of responsibility in that board. Like, for example, I was the chairman from the day when I was appointed there. I was chairman of the group risk and compliance committee.
mhm.
And that's where I lost all of my hair, Ed, because we were operating in countries like Afghanistan and Syria and Iran and all over Africa, and very stressful. And of course, my responsibility was risk oversight and compliance. So worked with him over that period of time, and a couple of things. As I said, I knew him, so I knew that he was obviously very concerned about um, the racial divide and the fact that black people were on the wrong side of the economy and all of that. And he pursued that aim, during his years as a kind of a trade unionist. And then so when I got onto the board, I first of all discovered, as I always knew, that he was very smart. He hasn't got a business education. He's a lawyer by training, but very smart. And when it comes to business and finance, self-taught when it comes to business and finance. So he knew what we were talking about. He would ask very penetrating questions. He would always come to board meetings prepared, and I write in my book, for example, that I never went to a board meeting unprepared. You
Mhm.
always do your homework. And by the way, you can pick up when directors come there and they haven't, done the homework. But he'd always done his homework. He hardly, over an 8-year period, he hardly missed a meeting. So he was very, very punctual, hardly missed the meeting. And I think he's got really great, he's a warm person. He's a warm person, amazing interpersonal skills, great sense of humor, right? And certainly under his leadership, I think we took the business to greater heights, right? Not just in this country, but across where we have our African footprint and our Middle East footprint. If the president has a weakness, I think it's a weakness that most South Africans are aware of. And I certainly saw this at play during our joint tenure at MTN on the board. He is very, very consultative by nature, very consultative by nature. And so and so that commitment to consulting as widely as possible, uh, you know, creates a perception, certainly, right, that he is indecisive, right? For example, and he wants to give everyone a voice. So our board meetings tended to be very long, So I mean, really, they tended to be very long meetings. Because of that, we would discuss an issue, and then he would say to you, if you're quiet and you're not participating, then he will say to you, so Ed, what do you think? Charmaine, what do you think? And I'm wired very differently. I want to get to a decision very quickly. And if you don't say much, Ed, and you don't say much, Charmaine, I may draw you out a little bit, but we're going to get to the decision a lot faster.
Sure.
And we'll move along the agenda a lot quicker. I mean, that's the way I'm wired. And I think he's wired, differently. And so that same consultative approach that he has, one can now see it in government. And it's not really working as well as it should, because we really need a lot more decisive leadership, right? There's one other thing that I must also say about that style of leadership. You see, for me, I tend to be a lot more decisive. And when things don't work out the way as planned, I will take the responsibility for it. And I'm also happy for you to hold me accountable for it, right? But if you have that broad consultative approach, it's almost like you don't take responsibility for the decision, and people can't hold you accountable, for the decision, because you know what? I consulted with everybody, and this was the consensus that emerged. So I think the kind of leadership style that I advocate is, I say, in a way that leaders must lead from the front, right?
Absolutely.
You must be prepared to take the responsibility, and you must be prepared to be held accountable. And that requires a lot of courage, because it's very easy for you when things go wrong to hide behind the fact that it was a consensus decision, that you spend hours and hours deliberating, So you say, hey, don't look at me. But I say that for you to have a more, decisive leadership approach actually requires a lot of courage, because you know that that the buck stops with you. And when things go wrong, you're going to say, okay, fine, I'm responsible. And because I'm the leader, you must hold me accountable. So I think, so that's really, so that's really, I would see it in some ways, in certain circumstances, it could be a strength. But I think the way it's manifesting now in government, it's clearly coming across as indecisiveness, and it's coming across as a weakness.
In my view, his approach is inefficient, and it's costing the country time, money, and that's why the poverty divide is being deepened to the extent. And it is a result of when a leader leads that way, he kind of gives permission to everybody else to actually follow suit. And we can't have, in my view, we can't actually have that. So thank you for that.
I want to just pick up on that point, which is that, really what we need in the country today is decisive leadership and also you have to hold people accountable, you see, and you have to hold people accountable. And I was quite curious about this train crash that happened, this tragic train crash that happened in Greece the other day. I'm not sure if you're aware of it,
Yeah.
where two trains collided. The Minister of Transport resigned within a day or two after that happened because he said, I'm responsible and I have to be held accountable, so I'm resigning. You see, so we don't have that level of accountability here, where people mess up and life goes on. I mean, take this thing about the cabinet reshuffle, for example, right?
He's sick at the moment, do you know?
No, no. Well, I saw a headline today which says that the president was gonna announce the reshuffle today, but he has a cold. That's the headline that I saw today. So yeah, I mean it's problematic. We need we need
We
we need a
need
lot
these
more.
guys of impact advocates like yourself that's
Yeah.
driving meaningful change, that's utilizing resources in ways that's going to benefit the lives of many. Ms. Van Rooyen, one more question. I know you speak about
Yes.
the dominance of white men in the golf and in the earlier days in the boardroom, but you also
Mm.
talk in your book, I mean, you give it a very balanced approach about the Comrades Marathon, right?
Yes.
And your influence, and talk a little bit about what the Comrades Marathon and what it stands for,
Yeah.
and how
So
your influence has had an impact in changing the dynamics. Just
yeah.
very quickly, if you don't mind.
So I met this colleague when I started my articles of clerkship, and his name is Bernie Friedman.
Hmm.
And Bernie was an avid runner, and we had conversations like this, about Jeff, tell me a bit of your experience and all of that. And Bernie was always fascinated, because I was giving him a first-hand account of what life was like under apartheid. And then because he was an avid runner, he spoke about the Comrades Marathon, and black folk were not allowed to participate in the race. You could run the race, but as a sort of an unofficial runner, you're not like part of the official race. And then Bernie decided that no, he was going to also run the race under the same circumstances in protest as a sort of an unofficial. And by the way, he ran very well that year. I mean, if he had run that race officially, he would have been in the top 10. And it is a long race. You run from Pietermaritzburg to Durban the one year, and the other year the opposite from Durban to Pietermaritzburg. It takes place over 90 kilometers, so it's a long race over 90 kilometers. The top elite runners run it in 5.5 hours, and the rest of us have up to 12 hours to finish the race, and so yeah, so Bernie ran that race under protests, and I'm still in touch with him. I mean, there's a good dialogue in the book between Bernie and myself. And then many years after that protest run, he got a special award by the Comrades Marathon Executive or whatever for his courage and all of those things. And Bernie credits me for having inspired him to run the race on that basis. And it's quite interesting during that time that it never crossed my mind to run the Comrades Marathon in any shape or form, right? And it was only much later, when I was 47 years old, that I ran the Comrades Marathon for the first time, and I've now run it 4 times, So
That's
that is my relationship with this race, a fascinating race. And of course, today it's open to all races, and black athletes are doing,
extremely
exceptionally
well.
well. They always feature prominently in the top 10. But there was also a myth at the time when it was exclusive to white people only. There was also a myth that black people, we had all these stereotypes that black people will never be able to finish a race like that, and they will never be able to win a race like that. And of course, now we've demonstrated, over the years, that was all just racist drivel, you know.
And that share is beautiful on multiple levels because, I mean,
Mm.
you had a conversation with somebody, shared your insights and your thing, and they wanted to change the world and make it better for everyone. 1974, he ran it, right, in protest.
Yeah.
1975, a year later, during your lifetime and my
Mm.
lifetime, it became open to people of all color as well as
Exactly.
women. So that's
Yeah.
just a profound impact that each of us can make in ways, have
Mm.
conversations that are truthful, authentic, open, to get people to just use their resources and power to drive change. That's what I love about the way you've navigated your story. I mean, today was like, just being very real. But in your book, the balanced approach, the people that have actually helped you, the difference that
Mm.
each of us can make is just
Mm.
amplified on so many levels. So
Mm.
even for me, even in times of hopelessness, we just need
Mm.
to find the light, as you say, and just persevere. So, yeah.
Mm.
Ed wants to ask something.
No, no, I just, I literally can see a part two,
Mm.
and bringing them back because there's
I'm
just
very
so much.
happy, Ed. I mean, I'm so grateful that you
There's so
guys have
much more.
invited me. I'm always ready. I was saying earlier on that the book has been out there since October last year, and very many people have asked me to write another book, and they want me to expand on my business insights. How to start a business, how to grow a business, how to access capital, and all of those things. So that's something that I'm thinking about. Maybe that will be that will be the next book. But I hope we can have another conversation even before then. But I've
We,
really enjoyed this conversation.
we
But can I
definitely
just
will.
make one last
Like,
point, if I may?
yes,
Sure.
please.
I think the last point that I want to make is that I am totally committed, heart and soul, to a non-racial democracy. You know, and I kind of feel that, having gone through racial discrimination and bigotry, right? I wouldn't want anyone to go there, and I'm trying to use the time that I have, to help build a better society, a society that is truly non-racial and non-sexist. I mean, that's what I want to do. And it's very encouraging to me as well that I have a wide circle of friends and family and business associates, who also share their vision and share their dream, that we have to find a way to unshackle ourselves from our racist past, and then do whatever we can do in our spaces, to create this new society. And I generally believe, Ed, that it's possible. If
It
you have a
is.
mindset that says it's possible, then you can do it.
Yeah.
And so I really believe it's possible, and that's what I want to do. I want to continue just making that contribution, that we can live together, and we can work in a way that we can create a better life for everyone, regardless of the color of their skin.
And you
So thank you
beautifully
for
closed.
allowing me to make that point.
And you beautifully closed out with Nelson Mandela's quotes as to a better
Yeah,
world for all of us, right? Not just some
exactly
of us.
right. A
And
better
and
world. Yeah.
yeah. And Mr. Van Rooyen, it's been amazing. And thank you for the work that you
Yes.
actually do. I love your spirit. I love your energy. And that's why I called you young, even though you're 73, because I mean, you're alive and passionate and you're moving and shaking things. And that's what we need, all
Yeah.
of us, to do.
Yeah.
Don't be
Yeah.
defined by anyone. Final points. It usually goes, if you had the speaker to the youth out there, what is it that you would actually scream out?
Yeah, and I do this all the time. I say, don't allow yourself to be drawn into negativity and into dark spaces. Because if you do that, you're not going to see the opportunity, even if it hits you in the face.
Mm.
I said, regardless of what's happening in the external environment, just remain focused on your goals and remain focused on your dreams and remain positive and believe, that you can get there, that you can achieve. I always say it starts here, If you believe it can be done, then then you can do it. If you lack the self-confidence, right? And then it also becomes self-fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, Thank you. That was absolutely beautiful. And yes, I do see a part two come up because I want to talk about Uranus Holdings and I want to talk about the Association for the Advancement of Black Accountants. So yeah, so
Yes.
definitely stay tuned. This has been another Ubuntu Connected podcast with the man himself, Mr. Jeff Ben Rooyen. Go to findingthefairway.org to learn more. I will be going there soon. And hey, donate if you can. If there's a donate section there, please donate. Thank you all, everyone. Have a good day, good night, good evening, wherever you are. Be blessed,
Love
everyone.
and light, everyone.